Bruno Mars is one of the greatest to ever do it, and after 8 years in the game, Bruno Mars was on top of the world. Uptown Funk, Locked Out of Heaven, Grenade, When I Was Your Man, Treasure, and countless other hits had established Bruno Mars as one of, if not the biggest artist of not just the decade, but of all time. I mean, the guy was just 3 albums in, and he already had a resume that rivaled the all-time greats. And with the 2017 Grammy season just around the corner, Bruno Mars going home with an award or two was to be expected. But what ended up happening that night created a firestorm that almost ruined Bruno Mars. But let's take a look at why. Firstly, let's not underappreciate Bruno. When you think about 2010's music, there's perhaps no artist quite as influential to the sound and trends of the music landscape as Bruno Mars. Think about it like this: the late 2000s and the early part of the 2010s were all about futurism. It was this EDM wave. And then Bruno Mars reintroduced the throwbacks into the mainstream of music, and I don't think I've heard an EDM song ever since. And you might think that I'm giving Bruno too much credit, but go back and listen to like the 2011 charts and the 2010 charts. The throwback aesthetic was not there. In fact, the reason why Bruno's second album is called Unorthodox Jukebox is because it was experimental to do throwback music. And the only reason why Bruno's first album wasn't full of throwbacks was because apparently the label didn't want him to. So there's a lot of validity to saying that Bruno Mars created the wave. And by the time 2016 rolled around, Bruno Mars was one of the biggest names in the whole music landscape. And it didn't seem like he was stopping either. Because a third album was just around the corner, and the lead single for the album, 24 Karat Magic, did amazing numbers. The song would debut at number 5 on Billboard's Hot 100, and it marked Bruno's highest debut up to that point. And after that, it quickly rose up to number 4? I don't know. I would have thought this song made it to like number 1, honestly, but I guess not. And I guess it makes sense when you look at the 3 above it. But I don't know, man. And as for the rest of the album, none of the songs went to number 1 either. Not even the album itself topped out the chart. Personally, for Bruno Mars, this is unprecedented. And come to think of it, the reviews for 24 Karat Magic were slightly worse than Unorthodox Jukebox. Could it be that after 6 years of Bruno Mars dominating the airwaves, people were growing tired of Bruno Mars? It sure didn't feel like it at the time, but I mean, it makes sense, no? You can only have so much success before people get tired of it, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, Bruno Mars was just too successful at a certain point. And Bruno Mars was about to find out what that meant. The year is 2017 and life is good. I think. I don't really remember. But music was definitely having a good year. Okay. Like, I don't know, people hype up 2016, but 2017 wasn't that far off. But if you ask the Grammys which 2017 album stood out as the best of the best, then they would nominate Melodrama by Lorde, Awaken My Love by Childish Gambino, Damn by Kendrick Lamar, 444 by Jay-Z, and of course 24 Karat Magic, which is a really good pool of records. And honestly, I can see the argument for every album on this list, but only one could take it home. By the way, I would appreciate if you guys would subscribe. I'm guessing this video will put me close to over 46,000, so that'd be nice, but I'm not gonna kill you if you don't subscribe. That's all I'm saying. And the Grammys had a tough choice ahead of them. Would it go to the alternative pop coming of age album that is Melodrama, or it could go to the psychedelic soul, funk, and R&B album that is Awaken My Love, or it could go to the Pulitzer Prize winning album that is Damn. There's also the 13th studio album by a legendary rapper that never got his recognition by the Academy. And of course, the throwback inspired album that defined the current era of music in 24 Karat Magic. And with everything being set, Grammy night was underway, and by the time the Academy announced the album of the year, none other than Bruno Mars had taken the award home.
Thank you guys so much.
And not only did he take that award, he took every single award he was nominated for that night. For reference, Bruno Mars walked home with 6 Grammys. That is tied for 3rd most all time. There's Michael Jackson, Santana, and then there's Bruno Mars, Adele, and Beyonce. And truthfully, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Bruno was simply at the wrong place at the worst time possible. Mostly because people were mad, not even necessarily at Bruno, but the Academy as a whole. The mid-2010s were a time where people really started to get mad at institutions and made their voices heard. Not long before this, the Oscars got into trouble for being too white, with a lot of people holding them accountable when it came to their biases against minorities. And the Grammys was no different, because as it relates to this ceremony in particular, with only one woman taking home an award for a solo non-gendered category. And just a year prior to that, the biggest talking point after Grammy night was that Adele had snubbed Beyonce, and that the Grammys had a bias against black people when it came to the big awards such as Album of the Year. And of course, Bruno Mars taking home every single Grammy he was nominated for was the face of that problem. As it relates to the big one in Album of the Year, he had taken home the award in a category full of 3 black people and 1 woman, making the win feel like it was based in politics rather than the music itself. After all, this is the same Academy that didn't allow The Weeknd to win at 2020 because he wanted to perform at the Super Bowl. So the narrative that Bruno Mars won because he was the only non-black male in the category made a lot of sense to some people, while others just turned on Bruno because they saw him as overrated, creating the perfect firestorm to ruin a career if handled poorly. Now, some of you might think I'm exaggerating, but think about the last time someone handled a Grammy win poorly. Think about Macklemore. That guy was set to be the next big thing in pop music, and then he disappeared after he apologized to Kendrick Lamar for winning a Grammy. Optics are reality when it comes to celebrity life, and something as dumb as winning too many Grammys can absolutely destroy your career, especially when you're being called a cultural appropriator like Bruno Mars was in 2018. But given that Bruno Mars is a relatively big name in music still to this day, I'm guessing most of you are wondering what made Bruno Mars capable of leaving the situation unharmed. And the truth is that Bruno Mars handled the situation doing the smartest thing someone can do. He didn't address it. Now, it is true that sometimes that is a very stupid thing to do, but specifically for Bruno, it worked out, especially because Bruno had legends in the game like Stevie Wonder defending him, calling out the hate train as some bullshit. Because on some real shit, what can I say against Stevie Wonder, man? And he's a legend. And because Bruno Mars never addressed it, those who weren't in the know ever found out that this was happening. And in a case of satisfying everybody, the people who didn't like Bruno kind of got what they wanted because Bruno Mars kind of stopped making music. I don't know if you guys realize this, but the last solo Bruno Mars album came out in 2016. He has not made an album, with the only exception being his collaborative effort with Anderson .Paak on So Sonic. However, it is worth noting that An Evening with Silk Sonic was withdrawn from Grammy consideration, possibly in an attempt for Bruno to avoid the same backlash. So basically, by ignoring the firestorm and laying low, Bruno Mars was able to keep that negative energy away from him. And with that, what could have been a career-ending event ended up being nothing more than a footnote in history. Anyways, when I posted about this video and how I was gonna release a Bruno Mars video, people did think it was gonna be a hate video, but hey, I said let me cook. Feel like I cooked, but I don't know. With that being said, shout out to Jay Dilla, shout out to God, shout out to y'all, and shout out to me.